This weekend, we will celebrate Father's Day. Back in April, Florida signed a bill into law, HB 7065. It was first of its kind legislation that addresses the root cause of the challenges facing children today and encourages responsible and involved fatherhood. Following their lead, two Republican members of Congress have introduced a resolution affirming the importance and impact of fatherhood in the development of America's children and the need to support efforts that promote and encourage engaged fatherhood. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But first, I want to bring in Florida House Speaker Chris Sprowls, who helped lead on this issue in the Sunshine State. Speaker Sprowls, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Joseph. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
We're so glad to have you. First, just give me a little bit of your heart. Why is it that this issue matters to you?
Yeah, it matters to me. Well, first, I have two little boys, and I could see, certainly in their life, but in the lives of all children, the importance of fathers. But just to take a step back, Joseph, because, this weekend we're going to celebrate Father's Day. I'm going to call my dad, and I encourage us all to celebrate dads across the country. But I also want this to be an action weekend for the country. The state of Florida moved forward because we've seen what happens when children don't have a father. And for those who are watching, the statistics are clear here. 1 in 4 children in America today will grow up without a present father in their home. And what do we know about those kids? We know that a child is 50% more likely to be depressed if they don't have a father in their home. They're 80% more likely to be incarcerated at some time in their life. A child with a present father is twice as likely to graduate from college or have a stable job. This is something that impacts not just kids and how they grow up and their heart of having to want to be by a father, but also their success in life. And as we look at all these ailments that come across our society, many of the dominating factors of those things can be linked back to not having a present father in our home. And it is time that we tackle that in a meaningful way. As you mentioned, the state of Florida this past year, we led the country in developing legislation that puts over $70 million into grassroots organizations that are lifting up fathers and getting them involved in the lives of their children. And if that's not possible, then a male mentor. Organizations like All Pro Dad, which has been championed by Family First, Mark Merrill and Tony Dundry, Man Up and Go. These are great organizations who are doing great work in our community. And now the state of Florida is leading in the biggest way in the country to lift up fathers and engage them in the lives of their kids.
And we're encouraged that you are leading in that way. It seems in so many ways we are looking to Florida and saying, yay, there's a great example. But part of this fatherlessness challenge that the country is facing, a lot of people have made a connection between the rash of school shootings that everyone is horrified by. It's far too common. Once it's too common, but the rate at which we are seeing mass shootings inside our schools breaks everyone's heart. But there's a lot of people who have connected the dots and noted that the young men and they are young men doing these things, are generally growing up without a father. Do you agree that that is part of the cause of what we're seeing in those cases?
There's no question. I mean, look, a country without active fathers is a country with more crime. It's a country with more depression, more suicide. This isn't my opinion, Joseph. This is a fact. Whether it's conservatives who are talking about it, religious leaders, whether it's individuals who I think would identify as more left-leaning, like Warren Farrell, who wrote a book called The Boy Crisis, where he goes through the 30 years worth of studies that back this up. There is no question. If you look at all those ailments that we just talked about, including, as you mentioned, the mass shootings and violence, the single dominant factor that unites those individuals is not having a present active father in the home. So we know that, and we've known it for a really long time. I think now we're just getting to the point where people are accepting that we're talking about it, and that when we talk about fathers and the importance of fathers, we of course are by no means demeaning the role of mothers. In fact, we're saying quite the opposite, that there's absent fathers. There's not an epidemic of absent mothers. Yeah. And I think that, what we need to have is an intact family. And we have to realize that the importance of engagement in children's lives are going to change their life for the better, whether that's getting a job, not being depressed, less likely to be incarcerated. These are items that impact all facets of our society, not just individual families, but literally the fabric of our communities. And we can talk about it. We know it's the truth. The question that we have and that's facing our country today is, are we going to do anything about it? And I think that's where Florida is a little bit apart, is that we've started to do something about it. I've spoken to many of our colleagues across the country who are presiding officers in legislative chambers or elected leaders, and we're encouraging them to pick up the mantle here in Florida. We don't want this to be a Florida thing. We want this to be an America thing.
Yeah, and we join you in that. We're talking to Speaker Chris Sprowls, Speaker of the House in Florida, and Representative. It's something where we understand environmentally that when there's an ecosystem, if you remove a salamander or a particular form of algae from that natural ecosystem, it disrupts the balance of everything that is happening there. But somehow, culturally, we seem to think that we can remove fathers from the home and everything's going to be fine as long as there are other adults around to love that child. But as you pointed out, the data is very clear that you can't. The family is its own social kind of ecosystem. God created in a specific way, and you can't just tinker with the variables because it's comfortable for you and you don't want to be there for the moment and then not have an impact. But I want to ask you one more question. Give me some of the details about this legislation. Of course, there's some things government can't do. There are some things government can do. What have you tried to do specifically that you think will encourage fatherhood in the state of Florida?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we've said that repeatedly, that, you can't legislate responsible fatherhood or good judgment or moral character. But what you can do is realize that there are people in this country who get up every single morning working on this issue and trying to get fathers in the lives of their children. If that's not possible, then to engage a male mentor for a child, realizing that a male role model is important in the lives of children, girls and boys, particularly boys. The studies show that for whatever reason, boys are more significantly impacted. We're seeing a K through 12 achievement gap for boys that is continuing to widen. We're seeing, folks like the Federal Reserve a number of years ago who said one of the greatest crisis in America is a boy crisis because boys are dropping out of the workforce. They're not getting employed. So one thing that we've done in this state is, and through this legislation, is we found these organizations, whether it's an all-pro dad who's focused on K-12 education, using sports as a hook to get fathers to pour into the lives of their kids, whether it's organizations who are talking to dads who are coming out of prison, who have had no relationship with their children, and giving them the tools to be an active father because they probably grew up in a home, given the statistics, that didn't have a present father. Regardless of where we find these dads, what their socioeconomic background, whether it's a foster parent or a male role model, there are great churches, there are great organizations who are doing this work. How can we support them to allow their work to scale? And that's the biggest thing that we did in our bill. We put $70 million into grants to make sure that these organizations have the ability to employ more people when there are proven methods of success, to allow them to reach more fathers and get them engaged in the lives of their kids. We also made the month, Responsible Fatherhood Month, and put $5 million into a media marketing campaign to tell all dads across the state how important it is to be an active father in their children's lives.
Representative Chris Sprowls, Speaker of the House in the state of Florida, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue, for your time today. Happy Father's Day to you.
Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate it.